Change Everything Live with your host, Andre Bailey. I am here today with Dr. David Swanson, Senior Pastor, First Presbyterian Church. We're supposed to say hi at that camera. Hello, everyone out there. As always, Change Everything Live. You're seeing a condensed version on CBS, but you can watch the entire show on YouTube Live, and it's available on Apple iTunes. This is cool, huh? Right?
This is awesome.
So, Dr. David Swanson, you pastor a church.
I do indeed. Been doing it for 14 years and have been in pastoral ministry for 27.
So I think the first question most people out there in TV and internet land would have is, so God, that's still a thing in America? we're still doing the God thing? Why should people have faith in their life still in 2018, 2019? Why is that something important?
I think it's important because there are certain things about life that require moorings, anchors, foundations that allow us to stay moored in life's difficulties and challenges. And so as we have become more individualistic in our approach to life, more self-sufficient, at least so we believe, much more dependent on our abilities and skills and knowledge, that all becomes threatened and challenged when outside circumstances that we have no control over threaten us. What is it that we really believe to be true about life, and what are the things that we stand on when the chips are down? And I think that's where faith continues to play a very, very important role. And we can get into some of that later, but I think that faith in America, and I'm not just talking about Christianity, but just faith in general, people who would believe in a higher power, while I don't think it's the majority anymore, I think faith is part of minority culture, not majority culture, and that's different depending on where you are in the country. You look at the Northeast, very much minority culture up there. You look at California, the West Coast, minority culture. You look at the middle of our country, the Midwest, the South, maybe still a little bit majority culture, but it's definitely not nearly as influential as it once was. That's definitely true.
I find it interesting that it's not just that less people have faith, statistically speaking.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like there's this growing aversion to people who say, I believe in God, that's a big part of my life. It's funny, you can listen to a podcast or watch a TV interview, and someone's like, they're having this conversation, and someone's like, yeah, well, my faith, tells me, and then you see the other person just react as though, almost sometimes viscerally, like, what? You're a person that has faith and believes in God. Why do you think there's this movement? And it's been moving a while, but why is there a movement kind of anti-religion and anti-God? Why do you think that is?
I think there are two reasons. One, I think you have seen so many instances of organized religion failing people, letting people down, abusing people, hurting people, people who were once trusted and revered as cultural, social, family leaders have been revealed to not be that. And I think there is a lack of trust that is, with every one of those stories that comes out, there's an increasing lack of trust in institutional religion. And I would, institutional religion to me is wholly different than the church, capital C, and we can get to that later. But I think there's a lack of trust. The other thing is, the more we have leaned into this idea since really the Enlightenment, that I don't need an outside source of truth, that I am my own truth, and that we are not allowed to even really discuss the merits of one another's truth. If I tell you what my truth is, most of the time culturally, you're not to judge my truth, and you're to allow me to have my truth. And I think that is correct in that we need to be free to believe what it is that we believe. But now religion comes in, and an organized religion or Christianity or any faith is actually saying, this is what you should believe. We believe this is true. And people just recoil from that. The very idea that someone else is going to tell me what to believe, I'm very individualistic. I determine my own truth. And man, they don't want to hear that. And so I think that's where most of that angst is coming from, is that growing individualism, a growing sense that there's no absolute truth, there's no truth that works for everybody, and I get to determine my own truth, and no one can tell me not to believe that.
So when someone comes in and they sit in your office, do you still do counseling, or do you have?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd imagine you do that a lot. Is it, this is a question, not even rhetorical, but is it that sometimes we have to hit tougher moments in life? Is it that challenges in life kind of lead us back to that there is some absolute truth that we should look at. I often say, gravity is interesting because I can say I don't believe in gravity, but if I jump off the roof of this building, gravity suddenly will prove to me that it is real, whether I believe in it or not. I absolutely agree that there are bigger fundamental principles in this world, in this life, that we just don't get to say those aren't true and those aren't real. I believe faith is very important. But I would tell you, do we have to, as individuals or as a society, hit tough times, hit challenges where it's not adding up now, and so now we might have to relook at the equation? Do you see that when people come to your office? Do you see that when they come to your church as a leader in Orlando, Florida? Do tough times have to be part of our journey to coming back sometimes to enlightenment?
Well, absolutely. That, if you look at your own life, I think most people would recognize the fact that when are the seasons in life when I learn? When are the seasons in life when I grow as a human being? When do I experience things that actually make me search and study and read? It's not when times are good. It's when times are hard. It's when I'm trying to figure out what is wrong in my life. Why am I unhappy? Why do I feel dissatisfied? What is this burgeoning discontent about? And that's when we begin to explore. And, great example, I'll do a funeral on Monday for a 46-year-old young man who, obviously 46 is way too young to die, had liver disease. And so his whole friend group will gather, and he was very well loved, and I was with them at the hospital. And you talk about something that rocks a 46-year-old's world, and all of his friends are like, wait a second. So it's in that moment that when you're kind of out there trying to build your life and you're young and you think, man, life is going to be this way, you're not going to think about ultimate questions. You're not going to think about eternal things because you still think you can build your own kingdom. It's when you start to realize that what you thought life was supposed to be probably isn't going to happen. And when you realize that bad things like dying at 46, and why did this happen to this man who was so well loved and such a good guy, what do I believe is actually the purpose for my life? What gives life meaning? And what happens when this is all over? And it's in those hard times that we actually start to confront some of those deeper existential questions. And I think that's why it in my faith tradition, in the Bible, it says, in this world you will have trouble. So it's not a question of will you, it's a question of just when it's going to happen. It's coming. And I think that most of the time those are the places where we learn.
It's my show, so you get to talk about the Bible if you want. Don't worry.
Good.
So,
okay, well,
Alex, our producer, is a heathen, but that's all right. No, he's
he
a good
won't be
guy.
in 30 minutes.
No,
so.
he's fine. So, we live in an interesting time right now, where I often say America is the richest, most powerful, economic, military, cultural country that's ever existed in the history of humanity, but we, as you look at the stats, just in the past couple of years, we've become more depressed. We're turning to substances at the highest rates we've ever in our history. And so at this time where we have this apex of resources, and I know not everyone is rich, I know not everyone's doing well. There's a lot of people in poverty, and that's an important conversation to have. But in a time where we have so much and we're so connected, it seems like more and more people are depressed and suicidal and despondent. And I have to believe that our walking away from faith, our walking away from this idea of a bigger part of our life, of your life being something that's connected to not just the divine, but to the idea that you have a mission and a purpose in your life. I have to believe that's part of the depression and part of this despondence we're seeing in record numbers. Now, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there are two things about that. The second part of it is I think some of the despondence is a result of a perception. They perceive that they have no control, that the world is on this path and I have absolutely no ability to change it. I don't like what's happening to it. I don't like my role in it. And I am I'm trapped. I'm stuck. I don't control my surroundings. And that becomes very deflating and very discouraging when they don't feel like they have the ability to control any of the outcomes in their life. So that's one. And then secondly, goes back to what you said about just finding a sense of purpose in life. It has to, if we don't find something beyond ourselves that gives our lives meaning, if we are expecting if you're expecting yourself to be able to give you all the things in life that you want to make you satisfied, content, happy, whatever it is that you pursue, yourself is never going to be enough. Life becomes transcendent when you find something bigger, larger that you can be part of and contribute to. So there's a guy named Stephen Garber. He's a vocational theologian, and he said, before you can answer the question, what am I supposed to do? You have to answer the question which precedes it, and that question is this: what is the larger story that I'm part of? So I can't know what I'm supposed to do unless I know what is this story that I'm a part of? What is this larger thing that I'm contributing to? And when I know what that is, then I can begin to chart what is my next best step. And I think everyone's trying to find that.
You know, I would tell you from my life, and I've seen you practice this as well,
Yeah.
a part of that larger narrative to what your life should and could be has to do with helping the poor and the needy and making a difference in those that are less fortunate. I think most faith traditions speak to that. You know, I'll tell you this. I was personally not raised with any kind of religious background. When I was introduced to faith when I was about 18 years old, a lot of the traditions didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But what made total sense is that if there's a God up there, that he wants us to help the poor and the needy, and if we're fortunate, to help the less fortunate. Why is that a big part of your life, and should that be a big part of a church and someone who has faith? In the bigger framing of our lives, how does helping others play a role in that?
Well, I think it's the very basis of Christian faith, and I would say, to your point, I'm thinking off the top of my head, I can't think of a major religious tradition that doesn't have some element of helping others. So I think that's true pretty much across the board. But in Christian faith, what is our, this time of year, what do we remember? We believe in the incarnation, that God came down. God came in human flesh into the messiness of humanity to do something about it and to redeem and save it. And so that then becomes the model by which we live. That in the same way that God kind of broke into our time and space, that we're called to go and to break into the time and space of others who are in need, just as we were in need and he helped us. So it's the very foundational principle of the incarnation that motivates me. And then you look at other things in Matthew 25, Jesus says, when you've done it to the least of these, you've done it unto me. And so there is this sense that we are called to serve the needy and the poor, because that was the model that God gave us in his Son. And then the whole notion of to whom much is given, much is required. That's in Luke 11. God has blessed some people, and if he gives you gifts and you bury them and you don't use them to help others, then I think you are. I think in fact you're being disobedient. And it's in those things. It's in the helping of others that you find the transcendent moments in life. That's where you find real meaning and satisfaction that you helped another human being on this journey that you're on too.
Yeah, your church is very involved with projects on homelessness. You actually chair the community initiative on homelessness.
Right.
When it comes to those in poverty or those that are kind of the least among us, why do you think that's important? Why is that an important part of your faith personally, and what you encourage your church members to do to get involved in that? Is there a special place in God's heart for someone that's fallen all the way to the bottom?
Absolutely. In fact, we, there's a great text that when you're hungry, you're supposed to feed them. When you're naked, you clothe them. When they're in prison, you visit them. When you're sick, you comfort them. And Jesus was always the one who went to the marginalized. He was always the one who went to the disenfranchised. He was the one who ate with quote-unquote sinners and tax collectors, and all the people who were supposedly on the inside said, why are you hanging out with the outsiders? And so I think we're always called, again, based on the model of Christ, called to be with the people who are less fortunate, who are poor, because they represent the true nature of the human heart, that we are all impoverished in our spirits in some way. And that's the reason why God has come to be with us. So I think it's important because God commands us to serve others. I think it's important because he told us, actually, when you do this, you're doing it unto me. And we have a statue outside of our church property by Timothy Schmaltz called Homeless Jesus. And it's a statue of what you would think is a homeless man shrouded, but the feet come out from underneath the shroud. It's a bronze sculpture. And you can see the nail marks in the feet, and you realize that's Jesus. And that just says to us, number one, if Jesus were to come today, where would he go? I believe he'd go to be with the poor. He'd go to be with the homeless and and the marginalized. And I think it also serves as a reminder to all of us, what are we doing to deal with those who are in need, and that as we care for them, we're caring for the very image of God.
You grew up in Dallas?
I did.
Wait, so you grew up there, born there, or where are you from originally?
I'm from Dallas.
From
Born,
Dallas.
raised, educated, all of it.
So are you still a Cowboy fan?
Absolutely.
So
Won 5 in a row. Let's go.
Do you put the jersey on Sundays, or how do you?
I've never been a big jersey guy. That's a little over the top for me. I do put on a Cowboys T-shirt.
All right, so you're going to
Much
suit
cheaper.
up on Sundays.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So hopefully the Cowboys are usually. Can you get to the game Can you get to a 1:00 start time, or
If I know the Cowboys are playing, thankfully the Cowboys are usually on here at 4:30, so I've got a little more time. But yeah, I can be home by 1:00.
sermon might get a little shorter,
Yeah.
knowing that Cowboys Redskins. I mean, we might have to call off church, right?
Well, if that's a 1:00 game, we're going to get a real short sermon that day. But, yeah. Presbyterians want to be out by noon anyway. They got lunch reservations.
That's true. So growing up in Dallas, you're a successful guy. You run a big church. You got a great family, married, got some great kids. Who are your mentors kind of growing up in life that helped lead you down your path of what we'll call success? And do you think it's important for people to have mentors and leaders in their life? Talk about your leaders.
Yeah.
Talk about your mentors and how they shaped you.
It's so I cannot imagine how anyone is able to do much of anything in life without coaches, mentors, people who invest in them when they're young. And I would say, number one, I was blessed and fortunate enough to have a phenomenal dad. My dad was an attorney. He was a self-made man, grew up in New York, poor, had nothing but got scholarships to go to college, went to Dartmouth in the Ivy League, got a full ride to SMU Law School in Dallas, and then practiced law in Dallas for 40 years. But I saw work ethic in him, that you need to work hard. I saw study habits, and I saw great empathy in his law practice for the clients that he had. And he was often doing wills and estates. And he would, on some Saturdays, if he had to go visit a client, he'd take me with him. And I would see my dad care for people after they'd lost a loved one. He was coming to explain to them, here's what the benefits are, here's what your husband has left for you. And he's explaining all these details to people who are grieving. And I saw my dad really care for each other people well. So that was a huge mentor in my life. Then I had several pastors along the way, youth pastors, college pastors, who invested in me. And then the man that I worked for 8 years during my first call as an associate pastor in Chattanooga, his name was Bill Dudley, and he poured his life into me, and he gave me every opportunity to do all the things that any pastor would do as a head pastor. He would let me do those things for a season. 1 year, I ran the budget. 1 year, I ran the Sunday morning services. 1 year, I was in charge of personnel. 1 year, I ran the school. So, by the time I was done, I had all this experience, and I'd had someone at my side coaching and teaching me through that. And so I actually wrote my doctoral dissertation on mentoring and the impact of one human life being invested and poured into another human life, and it had profound impact. The other thing that I think, and part of that study was how honored people feel to be asked. Some people go, well, I wish I had somebody to mentor me. Well, think about who are the people that are out there that you would love to learn from and grow from. Most of the time, if you go to them and say, I admire you so much, and I just see how wise you are and successful. Could I just be with you, a couple hours a month and just kind of hang out and watch what you do? Most people are going to feel so honored by that they will, 90% of the time, they'll say yes. So sometimes those people who are looking for mentors, all you got to do is think about who you'd like that to be and go ask them. Don't wait for it to come to you.
It seems like there's so many young people, I'll use that term very loosely, who are wanting mentoring, they're wanting leadership, and it seems like it's difficult. They would feel like it's difficult to find them. Millennials, Generation Z, they get a tough rap in our society, but where does someone turn like you, a younger version of you, if there's not a father, if there's not that pastor? I think there's so many folks out there who want their life to be transformed. They don't know how to find that personal imprint from other leaders. And I don't know that it's an easy answer, but I I guess I just wonder, where would you be without that? And so
It's super important.
Yeah, I think churches can be a great part of that. But in society, boy, I think there's a leadership gap right here, and a mentoring gap, just a passing on of wisdom, that without that wisdom, you just got to stumble your way through life.
Yeah, and that's a social development that I don't think has been good, and that is kind of a growing generational separation. That there isn't the same sort of respect and admiration from younger generations for older generations. I think just my anecdotal experience in my church and in the community is that older generations feel more and more pushed to the side. They don't feel listened to. They don't feel sought after. And that's actually something we're trying to build in our community. And I think what you're talking about is that very thing. It's going to be hard to find a mentor unless you actually have a community in which you're living out your life. So where do you find community? Is that at a local fitness club? Is that at a church? Is that at is that at work, through your employment? I mean, where's your tribe? Where's your people that you're doing life with? And if you don't have that, then I would highly encourage you to go find that. That is, I think, one of the great longings of our hearts, is to find a place where we feel like we belong. And that can be the beginning of really finding more meaning in your life.
It does seem like we gravitate to communities, and we'll make a community anywhere. I mean, I actually think that and I hate politics to my core, especially more and more as every day goes by. I hate it, and we have almost like a no politics ban on the show. But I would tell you, I think the incredible gravity you see towards people getting hyper political now.
Yes,
I think part of that comes down to, you can find community with other people that believe like you in politics. But you see people that go to the gym, go to yoga. There's community around fantasy football. So people, I think that we find community one way or another, find it on the internet. I think, though, to your point, there's been this almost strange cultural movement away from celebrating the past and the older generation or those that came before us. Part of me thinks it's because now we've been taught, and in a way rightfully so, to celebrate innovation and technology. Oh, I've got this iPhone 10, and when I got it the first week it came out, I was at the top of the mountain when it comes to technology. And now the iPhone 11's coming out, and the day it comes out, I'm a total loser because I've got the old iPhone. I think innovation, technology, and us naturally celebrating advancing forward in every area of our kind of society from, again, a economic, technological standpoint. I think a downside of that is that we default to anything that's older, any idea that's from the past, any person that did it that way before. Well, obviously that can't be as good as what's happening now. Yeah, and so I think communities used to exist in a way where you had folks who were younger, but you also had ideas and people that were older that could shepherd. There was a part of shepherding someone on their way up that someone who was younger was looking for, and someone who was older appreciated. You just don't see that anymore. So how do we find a way to return in our culture to a place where we celebrate the past while celebrating still technology and advancements? And our society's kind of reached this place where we're at an impasse. What do you think we should do about that?
Well, some of it, again, is our approach to life is very individualistic, and we look at it only from our lens, our view. And we tend to have, I think, a mistaken notion that when I arrive in a place, that I've arrived there because of how talented and gifted I am. And we don't realize that, there were actually people that helped us along the way, and there were people who put us through school, and there were people who mentored us perhaps, or people who trained us in some way, authors that we read and books that we learned from. And there's no way that we just sort of showed up and had all these gifts, and it was just by the sheer force of my will that I wound up in this wonderful place. It's ridiculous to think that, but our individualism says, well, it's my gifts, it's my skills, it's my knowledge, and I've landed here because I'm just a wonderful, dynamic person. And that minimizes those who have come before us. And I think, again, technology and all the things that we have access to today, all those wonderful developments, most younger people know far more than older people. And I think, to your point, I think they translate that on to older generations and say, because you don't know that, you're not as savvy as I am, and you're just not as sharp as I am. And so, you don't really know, and you just need to go ahead and go on out to pasture. When the reality is that person for the last 20 or 30 years has built what you're now standing on. And if you don't honor them, is to say then, well, what will become of you? I mean, it's a real stick your head in the sand moment. If you arrive and dishonor the person before you, and you don't think that's going to happen to you, what do you think is going to happen in 20 years when now you're the one who doesn't know and you don't understand? You're building a culture and a society based on a false principle. We need to honor what has come before us, because without it, we wouldn't be here. So I'm very much trying to learn and encourage our community to honor those who came before us and to really celebrate the wisdom that they have. Maybe they don't have IT wisdom, but they got a whole lot of life wisdom that we need to learn from.
Yeah, it's almost like we've reached this place where there's a whole generation that has been empowered by technology.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, without technology, most industries, most parts of our life, when technology is brought in, it's disrupted and it's made better, in theory, through technology. But to leave aside all the wisdom that technology really rides upon, the ideas that made our culture, made our families, made us live, work, play together. There's almost like this impasse where those two, they're struggling to integrate together.
Can I go back and connect one dot
Sure.
on something you asked in terms of the relationship from our purpose and poverty and serving the poor? And, I think one of the things that we talked about in terms of individualism, we're much more focused on ourselves. So we tend to not really care that much. We don't care about others. We don't care about those in need as much as we used to. And in the same way, we don't care about older generations as much as we used to. There's really interesting data on our generosity, and it's reflected in that too. So, for example, in 1950, and these are statistics from World Vision, which is a worldwide mission organization, 1950, just in the United States, the average U.S. citizen gave 3.6% on average of their income to charitable causes.
Okay,
So not just church.
Okay.
1950, 3.6. By 2000, 50 years later, you think of all the economic development, everything that has come into the United States in those 50 years, generosity actually dropped from 3.6% to 2.4%. So we have more today, and yet we give less.
Wow.
And so it, again, speaks to I'm much more invested in myself. I want to spend on myself. I'm not as concerned about others. And when you look at the needs of the poor and all the issues that are before us, and the fact that people give less, it really is. And when you think about the most generous cities in America, what city do you think is the most generous city in America? You've been to this city.
I have no idea.
Salt Lake City.
I should have guessed that.
And what's interesting is Salt Lake City on average gives 5.1% of their income to charitable causes.
Wow.
Orlando beats the national average. We're 13th.
Okay.
And we give 3.9%. But we go, oh, wow, okay, Salt Lake City's number one. But to me, I still go, and that's it? That's all they give is 5%?
5 cents out of $1.
Yeah.
And that's...
And everyone goes, oh, ooh, ah, yay for Salt Lake City. I'm thinking, wow, that's not as generous as I would hope we would be as a culture.
So how do we increase generosity? How do we get people to have this allegiance to helping others with their own resources? What's your advice?
Well, I think number one, you have to plan to give. So if you are a typical American, what you do is you pay the biggies, the mortgage, the car, the insurance, pay for your kids, save for college, your house, all that stuff. And then you get to the credit card bills and the sundry items, and you get to the very end of the month, and you look at what's left, and you go, okay, of that, what am I going to do with that? Am I going to save that? Or am I going to give that away? And if I'm going to give it away, who am I going to give it to? And you have a lot of nonprofits who need money, and so you get a lot of solicitations. And there is a lack of trust, so people aren't really sure about that. So I think one of the things you need to do first is sit down and think about it. How much money do I bring home in a month? You would be amazed. We do this on marriage retreats. We take couples away for a weekend, and we'll have them sit back to back, and I'll ask them these questions. Write down, as a couple, how much money you think you bring in each month. Write down how much you save. Write down how much you give, and write down your total indebtedness. And very few people know. And most of the time, most of the time, neither one of them know everything. And most of the time, it's just one who knows, the other one doesn't. So there's like a financial manager in a couple, and the other one doesn't know. So we don't plan to do that. And then I don't know that we're ever going to be generous until we have something that is deeper than our own need, until we have a belief in something larger than ourselves that compels us to give. So I'm not suggesting that could be faith. I think faith, obviously, in my opinion, would be huge. But maybe you have a real commitment to and a belief in the needs of foster children. If you have a passion for foster children, then I think you will become generous because you believe that matters. Maybe you have a passion for urban poor communities and urban areas of the particular city you live in. Then you might become more generous to that. But if you don't have a passion for anything beyond yourself, then I don't think you're ever going to be generous.
People don't always like to hear other folks talk about their faith. It's, again, at times it's become a weird part of our society. I got to tell you, for me, nothing really changed my outlook on helping others, giving, other in the way that faith did. Mm-hmm. Faith transformed the way I saw my place in this world to where giving wasn't like part of, well, I've got to go to work, I've got to have a family, you got to give to the office. And it was that faith changed the way I saw my position in our society. That, mm-hmm. And so suddenly, because of that, I said, hey, this is part of the framework of my world. It wasn't sacrificial as much anymore. I mean, giving money is always sacrificial. Mm-hmm. Giving time is always sacrificial. But it was part of who I am. It was part of my life. No one pays you to put on that Dallas Cowboys T-shirt. No one makes you watch America's team on a Sunday morning. Sure. It's part of who you are. You love it. You pay to watch the Cowboys play. Sure. I would just tell you, although it's not always popular, nothing made me motivated and changed my opinion of how I should help others like faith did. I know sometimes I watch you do this so well. You try to always be very respectful of other people, and if they aren't someone with a faith tradition, you're completely cool with that. It's tough, though, because for me, again, I was just I just was not that interested in, if I'm honest, I wasn't that interested in the needs of other people, and even in some ways how I treated them without the moral anchors of faith and without the construct of, oh, my life is part of something divine where I'm supposed to be, I'm an actor in this big theatric divine play. There's a story being written. David, nothing changed me other than that. And so that's where I think faith can be such a positive part of our society. You said earlier, there's so many people that have had bad impressions of faith because of churches that have failed or institutions of faith that have not done a good job. I think where people of faith have a great opportunity is when they see someone involved like you are, helping the needy, helping the poor, but because you see that as part of your faith. I think that's what's transformational. And I don't know how people have real transformation and do unto others unless it's part of their moral fabric. I don't know how it happens.
Well, and that's where I feel like as people consider, how is it that I am getting through this thing called life, and how do I manage the challenges and the crises? If you take away any kind of foundational truth, any core concrete truth that will always be true, any belief in something that is larger than you or a higher power, that I believe in God. If you take that away, and if we allow for where many people are today, and that is that life is chance. Like we're here just because things happen to line up the way they did, and there's life on this planet, and we evolved to where we are today. If you take away any larger creator God who would have ordained a purpose for which he made us, then you're left only with life as purposeless. I mean, there's really if this is all chance, then there's no ultimate reason for us to be here. And if that's the case, then you can teach all the character education in public schools that you want to, but at the end of the day, the kid's going to go, why? Why do I have to be honest? There's really not an ultimate answer to that other than because we think that's best. Well, why do you think that's best? Well, because without that, there'd be anarchy, and people would be in the street stealing things, and it's just not the right way for people to live. Oh, okay, but what's happening today? Now people are saying, well, because there is no ultimate truth, then I'm going to determine my truth, and that truth can be anything that I want it to be. There's a guy in France today who has sued because he doesn't want to be 69 anymore. He wants to be 49 because it gives him more opportunities with women. And he believes that his birth certificate should be changed so that he can be reflected as a 49-year-old because that's what he believes.
Is there a term for that? He feels like he's being ageismed?
It's ageism, I guess.
Ageism, okay.
So you can take that down any road you want, but I think when you eliminate the existence of God, you have to go down where that road leads. Sometimes we like to make statements like that, but we don't follow it out to its natural conclusion. That's a pretty dark, hopeless place. I mean, that isn't where I'd want to wind up, and that means, one day I'm going to be food for worms. So what am I going to do here? I'm going to get all I can, and why would I waste my time serving other people if this ultimately doesn't matter? I mean, it throws up in the air any notion of right and wrong.
Yep. Now Alex is going to tell me to tell you don't tap on that table. I'm sure he's reading his mind right now, but yeah, no, you're fine. It's interesting because ultimately, how do you find a way to respect a society that wants to be individuals?
Right.
Don't tell me about your faith, but at the same time, I see so many folks who are looking for an anchor, for something bigger in life, and I think that's the big quandary for a guy like you who's pastoring a church. How do you reach people with this truth without making them feel alienated? There's this big conversation right now. Well, if you say that's the only way to go, then you hate everybody. You're a hater,
right? And all of a sudden, the wall goes up.
You've had that happen to you before, where
Absolutely.
where you say, "Hey, I have this faith. I'm a Christian, so I believe these things," and now you hate everyone. So, how do you find that balance?
Yeah, and that's really hard for me, and I'm not sure when it happened where two people were not allowed to disagree and yet still be friends. And that's where, I might not agree with everything that you happen to think. And I know you're not going to agree with everything I think, but we can still be in relationship. We can still be in conversation. Why is it, and when did it happen that if I believe that my faith tells me that these things are true, and that contradicts what you think is true, so we disagree on that. Why is that the end of the world, and why do we have to now hate each other?
Yeah, it is in the last probably 5-7 years, decade, it has become where if we don't agree, those of us in society, we have to assign to the other person some label that's incredibly negative. I mean, we couldn't, in politics, it couldn't be more of an example of this. And by the way, I hate politics and everyone in politics. No, I'm just kidding. I love all of my political friends. You're wonderful. But just say this. Jesus wasn't a politician, all right? He was someone who just served people in need. But politics is definitely a place where there's zero now allowance for any disagreements at all. And so, but I think that's everywhere in our society.
True.
We just don't know how to disagree anymore. When I think about that, though, Dr. Swanson, I think that doesn't show that people believe more in their ideas. I think it shows that people are more insecure about their ideas. Because if you walk in here and you tell me that you believe green Martians live on the moon, and I don't believe green Martians live on the moon, I'm not really intimidated. I'm not going to have all this energy and emotion towards your idea. I think we have a lot of people who scream really loud about things they believe, but inside there must be some kind of insecurity around that, because if someone believes different, now the only conclusion is to demonize them or say that person is bad. Why do you think we've become that way?
Well, I think you're 100% right that it has to do with our own securities and our own insecurities, and that we're not totally sure that we have found that thing that's going to give us contentment, meaning, purpose. And I think this might, but if someone now comes and says something that threatens that, then I get overwrought and distraught and angry. How dare you? And there's I'm actually talking about this on Sunday. Maybe you've noticed, as we're talking about, people are just mad. And I can't even watch cable news anymore, which I actually used to enjoy. But now it seems like every time I turn it on, there are just two people arguing with each other, and they're both just mad. And so James asks this great question. He says, why do you quarrel and fight amongst each other? And he says, it's because you want something and you can't have it. And so what I've realized is we got so many people who are mad and angry, but it actually has far more to do with us as individuals. If I'm mad at you, that anger actually has much more to do with me than anything that you've done to me. It's the fact that there are desires that I have in my heart that are unmet and unfulfilled, and therefore I'm mad that I can't have them. And I think at its very core, I always thought that life was going to be this. I expected life to give me that, and it doesn't, and I can't make it, and I can't figure it out, and I'm ticked. And I think, well, maybe this tribe over here, these politics, this ideology, maybe this will make life give me what, and then it doesn't work. And so we're on to something else, but we're always trying to find that need in our life, that longing to have life finally give us what we thought it would, and it won't ever. And so that's where you start getting into transcendent questions about meaning.
Yeah, we're more connected than we've ever been. We have, in theory, a lot of us more resources than we've ever had. We have more options for everything than we've ever seen in human history, but yet we don't want to admit that we feel like something is missing. And this is where all the people who again are religious haters, this is where I probably have my biggest qualm with them, is that, at the end of the day, faith has an incredible ability. I know not everyone who leads a faith tradition, not everyone who practices faith is perfect. If you want to find hypocrites or those that use faith the wrong way, you're going to find them everywhere. That's human nature. But I would tell you, in a society more and more that's looking for answers and who seems mad and despondent every day that they can't find those answers, is it a coincidence that faith continues in that same society to be relegated to the sidelines, pushed aside? Faith isn't going to be for everyone, obviously, but I think, boy, again, I can speak to my own experience. Nothing centered my world and made it make sense like my faith did. And I didn't grow up religious, so that was a big change. So I do think we have to look at faith again in our society. Where are we one day with no faith? If we're going to go down this road where we're going to eliminate faith as part of our culture 50 years from now, what does that America look like?
Well, and that's a great question, because that to me speaks to the idea of religious freedom and where we are as a culture about what we believe to be true about giving people the freedom to express their religious views, that actually we need to allow one another to truly believe what we believe, that we can't expect neutrality. And I don't think that's fair to a Muslim. That's not fair to a Buddhist. I wouldn't go to a Muslim and say, well, you need to be neutral. No, I want you to be free in this country to believe everything that you believe. And I want to be free to believe what I believe. So to the non-believer member of the audience, I am all about religious freedom. This is not about any one religion, kind of taking over or dominating. I want everyone to be free to believe what they believe, because not only is it good for my faith and for the people that I worship with, but I think that's good for every faith tradition, that we have the ability to worship freely and to, as you said, to acknowledge the contribution that faith makes. And so there's a movement these days to eliminate the tax freedom that religious institutions enjoy, that we are exempt from taxation. Well, if you start taxing the property values and the revenue streams that go into faith communities, you're going to start seeing faith communities lose buildings, and they're going to be pushed to the absolute edges of where communities are being built, and they will no longer be able to afford to be in and amongst the people. And without that influence, I mean, if you take the influence of religious faith out of this country in the last 250 years, where would we be? It's the basis for our entire legal system. And so I think that's a great question. I pray that as a culture we would maybe we don't believe it, but can we at least acknowledge that there is value in having religious communities among us that inculcate character and things like caring for the poor into the population?
David, you see a lot of young people walk into the doors of your church. Do you think that those that are younger, 30 years old, 29, younger, did they have a different view of faith? Do they have a different view of the world than those that came before them?
I really think they do. I mean, I look at, and you mentioned earlier, kind of the millennial generation, and I kind of generally, lump that into people in their 20s. And I
You have a couple boys who are millennials, right?
and a daughter. I got three kids,
okay.
all of millennials. So, and a lot of people go, oh, millennials, they're so touchy-feely. They just want to sit around and talk about their feelings, and they want to work hard. They want things handed to them, and I want to push back on that, and I value millennials because and right now. We have 100 professional staff at First Pres, and now half of them are millennials because I love how they think. And number one, they've got the latest social media, tech ideas, ways of communicating that I haven't understood that they can teach me. But millennials are constantly trying to look at and change in a positive way. What does our culture look like? And I believe millennials are the first generation that are pushing back on individualism that has kind of taken root in our culture. What do millennials love? Community. Everything about them. And it doesn't matter what they do. You get a bunch of millennials and they're going to go, hey, it's Friday night. We're all going to ride bikes, meet down at we're going to go bowling. We're going to go eat pizza. It doesn't matter what the activity is, but we want to do it together. We want to experience this together. And I love the way they're trying to push us back to what it means to be in relationship with each other. And millennials want authenticity. They're tired of spin. They're tired of being lied to. They want authenticity. They want honesty of relationship, and all that can have tremendous influence in our culture. So I believe they're absolutely different than generations that have come before them because they've seen what has happened. They've seen the outcomes of that, and they're trying to say as gently as they can, we want to move in this new direction, and they are moving our culture that way.
So millennial walks in your church and says, I've got this life I'm living. I want to figure out how to incorporate God into that life. What do you tell them?
I would say let's go to lunch. I mean, I'm not gonna lord over them some crystal ball, or I'm not gonna take my Bible and say, well, let me show you Matthew chapter 1. I want to hear who they are. I want to get to know them. I want to know what they're passionate about. I want to know their family of origin. I want to know all those things because to me, this is, and this is not just true in faith, it's true in any dimension of life. I think it all begins with relationships. And that's part of you and I being able to disagree and still be in relationship. You need to know that I care about you as a human being regardless of what you believe. And so when you know that and you and I have a relationship together and we reach a point of disagreement, well, then that's okay because we've built a relationship that can sustain that disagreement. But in the absence of any relationship, well, of course, we're just going to be mad at each other. So I think I would say to that person, let's go have lunch and let me get to know you. And then as we know each other, well, then ask me some questions about faith. And I'll share some things that you might want to go look at. And why don't you read this book and explore that, and then let's talk about it. So it's not so much making pronouncements, but I want to ask questions like, where do you find meaning? What gives your life purpose? How do you think what you do for work contributes to the larger society in which you live? How do you answer those questions?
All right, so with your boys and with your daughter, they're growing up. What's 2 or 3 of the biggest pieces of advice you gave your kids on how to be successful in life? What were the 2 or 3 anchors that you always kind of try to implant in your kids that you wanted to see them, that you thought would make them successful and have significance in their life?
Well, first was relationships. As I just said, I think that they had to be good at getting to know people, caring for people in whatever profession they wound up being in. How are you creating conversations so that it's not about you, it's about the other person? So people love to talk about themselves. So when you walk into a room, you need to be the person that's asking the questions and drawing the other person out and building relationships in a positive way and demonstrating care for them in some way. That's number 1. Number 2 is integrity. That this whole idea of authenticity of life, that who I am is the same, and no matter who I'm with, no matter what my circumstance is, what you see is what you get, and that has to be grounded in the third thing, which is who are you in regard to faith? What do you believe to be true, and how do you live that out each and every day? And if you don't know faith, then it's very hard to know what fidelity is, and that's what I think also is lacking in our culture, is true fidelity. No one's faithful anymore. You don't see it in marriage. You don't see it in friendships. You certainly don't see it in professional sports. You don't see it in businesses. Where is faithfulness and loyalty? We're willing to turn our backs on anybody for a buck. And I want people who are going to be faithful. And you don't really know what fidelity is until you know that there's a God who loves you, regardless of your unfaithfulness to him. He's never going to give up on you. And no matter where you are, he's going to pursue you. And if you know that in your heart of hearts, then you'll know and understand what true fidelity means.
Dr. David Swanson, senior pastor, First Presbyterian Church in Orlando. How's Orlando? You like living in Orlando?
I love Orlando. I wish it was a little cooler more. I don't really like the summer much. But other than that, I don't really have any complaints. I love it here.
It's not hot in Dallas the way it is in Orlando?
It's not as hot for long. It's in Orlando, it's pretty warm for 7-8 months of the year. Dallas actually has a few seasons. And, yeah.
So the Cowboys, are they going to pull it off this year? What do you think?
Probably not. I bet they'll make the playoffs, but that's probably about as far as they're going to go.
Well, if it's God's team, then we'll see what happens.
That's right.
Dr. David Swanson, thanks for coming in and chatting with us. Faith, an important part of our society, and we've got to continue to find. What I like about you is you're someone that knows how to be faithful to what you believe, but still compete in the arena of ideas and talk to folks that believe different than you. And you're also out there every day trying to make a difference in your community, taking on issues that matter. And again, if I could encourage people of faith, I think that example is what's critical. The example of, have your faith, have your Sunday morning, have, what you believe and live it. But think about those outside of your church. I think you do a great job of that. Mm-hmm. Thanks for coming in. Everyone, you can see the entirety of this podcast and the entire interview we did on YouTube Live. If you missed part of it, if you're watching this on WKMG CBS, we'll see you again. Change Everything Live with Dr. David Swanson. We are out.